Elliot Morrow, a man in his early 70s, had long since given up on the idea of excitement. He lived alone in a small cottage tucked away at the edge of a fading town, where the hustle and bustle of life seemed a distant memory. Years of routine had dulled his senses, and every day blurred into the next, like a painting left out in the rain, washed out and forgotten. The years had not been kind to him. His once sturdy body now creaked with age, and his mind occasionally wandered into places that felt too distant to reach. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 3 years ago, and with her went his last thread of joy. His children, who once filled the house with laughter and noise, now lived far away, busy with their own lives, too caught up in the world to visit. The quietness of the cottage, with its creaky floors and flickering lights, seemed to echo the emptiness in his heart. Yet, in his solitude, Elliot had come to accept the slow rhythm of life. He spent his days tending to the garden, walking through the quiet streets of town, or sitting by the fireplace, reading books he had already read 100 times. The world, it seemed, had moved on, and Elliot had resigned himself to the fact that he, too, was moving towards the end of his own story. On this particular evening, the wind was heavier than usual, sweeping through the trees with a low, mournful hum that seemed to carry a sense of warning. Elliot, wrapped in his old, faded coat, shuffled down the narrow path that led to the market, his steps slow but steady. The sky above had turned a deep, brooding gray, clouds hanging heavy with the promise of rain. He had been to the market many times in the past, and the town had always seemed to reflect his mood, quiet, almost forgotten by the world outside. The few people he passed barely acknowledged his presence, lost in their own thoughts, just as he was lost in his. He didn't mind. There was comfort in the familiarity of the place. As he made his way back home, his small satchel of groceries swinging from his arm, something unusual caught his eye, a flash of light, too bright and fast to be a firefly dot at T-first. Elliot thought it was a trick of the fading daylight, perhaps a reflection from the distant hills or the last remnants of the sun. But then the light moved again, this time leaving a streak across the sky that seemed too deliberate, too purposeful. Elliot stopped dead in his tracks, squinting up at the strange glow. The air around him seemed to pulse with a strange energy, a feeling that something was not quite right. His heart began to beat faster, not out of fear, but curiosity. The light grew larger, closer, until, with a sudden burst, it split the sky above him with a bright flash, as if the heavens themselves had cracked open. For a moment, all he could do was stand there, staring up in awe, his mind racing to explain what he had just witnessed. Was it a meteor? A plane crashing? But no, this wasn't like anything he had ever seen. It was too fast, too erratic. And then it hit the ground, shaking beneath him, as though the earth itself was trying to tear itself apart. The shockwave knocked him off balance, sending him stumbling back, almost tripping over his feet. His breath caught in his throat, a rush of adrenaline flooding his body. Was it an explosion? The sound of the impact echoed in his ears, a deep, guttural thud that reverberated through the ground. Panic surged through him as he realized it had come from the forest at the edge of town. Without thinking, his legs moved on their own, carrying him towards the source of the noise. His old heart pounding in his chest as he approached the edge of the forest. The air seemed to grow colder, the trees rustling with a sound that was far too sharp and unnatural. His breath came in short bursts, his lungs struggling against the sudden exertion. He could feel the weight of his age, the weariness in his bones, but his curiosity pushed him forward. The underbrush crunched beneath his boots, and soon he was standing in a small clearing, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark, uncertain air. There, in the center of the clearing, was a smoldering crater in the earth, its edges glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. It looked like something from a dream or a nightmare. Elliot's heart skipped a beat as he took a cautious step closer. In the middle of the crater lay something or someone. At first, he thought it might be a trick of the light, an illusion brought on by the shock of what he had just witnessed. But as he moved closer, he saw it more clearly. A figure crumpled on the ground, unmoving. It was a woman, but unlike any woman Elliot had ever seen. Her skin was a soft shade of blue, shimmering faintly in the moonlight, and her hair, if it could even be called that, was long and flowed like liquid, shifting in color between deep purples and silvers. She was beautiful, but there was something otherworldly about her, something that seemed to defy every law of nature he knew. Elliot's first instinct was to run, to turn and leave the forest behind, to pretend he had seen nothing. But he couldn't. Something, an unexplainable pull, kept him rooted to the spot. His breath caught in his throat, his mind racing for a reason, a solution, anything to explain what he was seeing. But the truth was, he was already too deep into the mystery to walk away now. The figure in front of him stirred, and Elliot's heart nearly stopped. She was alive. Before he could take another step, her eyes shot open wide, bright and glowing like twin stars. She looked directly at him, and for a moment, Elliot swore time stood still. Her gaze was not just that of a person, but of something far older, far wiser. A deep sense of confusion and urgency flashed across her face, and then she lifted her hand towards him, as if trying to say something, but no words came. Elliot took a hesitant step forward, unsure of what to do. "Are you all right?" he managed to ask, his voice shaking. But the woman didn't respond. Instead, her body jerked as though some invisible force was pulling her, and in a sudden, fluid motion, she collapsed at his feet, her strange, glowing eyes still staring up at him. Elliot's mind raced. His first instinct was to help, to get her back on her feet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some ordinary accident. No, this woman, this strange being, was a part of something much bigger, something that had found its way into his quiet life, and he couldn't help but feel that nothing would ever be the same again. Elliot stood frozen for a moment, his breath shallow, eyes fixed on the woman lying at his feet. The night had become unnaturally still, as if the world around him was holding its breath. He could feel the weight of her gaze even though she hadn't spoken, and the fear gnawed at him. Was she hurt? Was she in some kind of danger? He bent down slowly, his hands trembling as he reached out to check for a pulse. The instant his fingers brushed her cool skin, something shocking happened. Her eyes snapped open again, glowing with a fierce intensity that sent a chill down Elliot's spine. For a brief second, the world around him seemed to blur, as if reality itself was flickering. The woman's lips parted, but the words that came out were not the ones he expected. "You are not like the others." Elliot jerked back, startled by her voice, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to echo from somewhere far away. "What do you mean? Who are you?" he stammered, unsure of what to do, his mind racing. The words didn't make sense, yet the way she spoke them carried an urgency, a strange knowing, like she was looking through him rather than at him. She blinked, her gaze unfocused for a moment, as if struggling to come to terms with her surroundings. She pulled herself up slightly, using the tree behind her for support. Elliot took an instinctive step back, feeling a sense of danger rising in the pit of his stomach, though he couldn't explain why. The woman's appearance was still unsettling, her blue skin, the vibrant glow of her hair, the strange aura that seemed to emanate from her. "I don't understand," she murmured, her voice barely audible now. This place is wrong." Elliot furrowed his brow. "What do you mean wrong?" She didn't answer right away, her eyes scanning the forest as if she was searching for something. A flash of fear crossed her face. Then, with a sudden, sharp movement, she collapsed again, her body swaying as if weighed down by an invisible force. Elliot knelt beside her, reaching out instinctively to catch her, but she stiffened at his touch, and a strange energy surged through him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her eyes locking with his, and for the first time there was a hint of desperation in her voice. "You don't understand. You don't know what you've awakened." Elliot's pulse quickened. He felt like he was in over his head, his mind desperately trying to grasp what was happening. He had never been a man of action, a man used to taking risks, but this moment felt different, like some invisible force was pulling him deeper into a situation he had no control over. The woman's words were cryptic, but they rang in his mind, echoing like a warning. I don't understand," Elliot said again, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up on him. "I saw something fall from the sky. A light, and then you. You're not from here, are you?" She shook her head, her lips trembling as though she was trying to find the right words. "No," she whispered, her voice growing weaker. I am not from here. I am from far beyond your world. My name is Lyra. Elliot blinked, his heart racing. Lyra? But where are you from? What happened to you? The woman Lyra seemed to struggle with the question, her gaze distant as if lost in thought. She blinked, looking at him as though seeing him for the first time, her eyes narrowing. I didn't expect this, she murmured, her voice far away. I didn't think I would crash here. They are hunting me. I had to run. I had no choice. Hunting you? Elliot repeated, his brow furrowed. Who's hunting you? Who are they? Lyra's expression hardened, and Elliot could feel a shift in the atmosphere, as if something had changed in the very air around them. Her body tensed, her eyes flashing with an unsettling intensity. The Valkyrie, she said, her voice low and filled with dread. They are a race of merciless conquerors. They have been hunting my people for generations. They will stop at nothing to eradicate us, to destroy everything that remains. The name felt heavy on Elliot's mind, though he had never heard it before. Valkyrie. The word seemed to carry a weight, a history of destruction and death that was beyond anything he could comprehend. I don't understand. Why are they hunting you? What do you mean, my people? Lyra's eyes flickered toward the sky, her face contorting with fear, as if she could feel the weight of the words before she even spoke them. We were once a powerful race, one that lived in harmony with the stars. But the Valkyrie came. They destroyed our world. We were forced to flee, scattered across the galaxy. I'm the last of my kind. Elliot's mind reeled with the gravity of her words. He could barely wrap his head around the idea of a race of beings who could wipe out entire civilizations, let alone the fact that he was now standing face to face with the last survivor of that race. His first instinct was to reach out to her, to comfort her in some way, but there was something else there, a deeper, more primal feeling stirring within him. Lyra's voice trembled as she continued. They've tracked me here. They will find me, and when they do, they will destroy this world too. I won't let that happen. I won't let them kill everything. Elliot felt his heart pound in his chest. Her words sank into him, and despite the fear gnawing at his insides, he felt something else, a surge of determination. What can we do? What do you need me to do? Lyra looked up at him, her expression torn. You cannot fight them alone. You are not like us. Your people are not prepared for this. Then teach me, Elliot said, surprising himself with his own words. I may be old, but I'm not useless. If there's anything I can do to help you, I'll do it. For a moment, Lyra said nothing. She only stared at him, her glowing eyes studying him with a mixture of disbelief and something else, something that resembled hope. It was the first time he'd seen that expression on her face, and it sent a strange, warm feeling coursing through him. You would help me? She whispered, her voice soft, almost incredulous. Even if it means risking your life? Elliot nodded, his resolve solidifying. You're not alone anymore. I don't know what's coming, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. Lyra's eyes softened, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I didn't think I would find help here, but maybe I was wrong. The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter in that moment, as if the universe itself was watching them. And as Elliot looked into Lyra's eyes, he realized that this quiet life he had lived for so long, one of solitude and resignation, had been nothing more than the calm before the storm. The real story was only just beginning. The days that followed felt like a blur to Elliot. The world he had known for so long, the quiet routine of his life, was slipping away, replaced by an urgency he couldn't escape. Every conversation with Lyra seemed to unveil new layers of mystery, and every word she spoke made him feel like he was stepping deeper into something far larger than he could comprehend. The woman he had found lying in the forest was no ordinary traveler, and her story was far from the simple tale of a lost soul. She was the last of her kind, a survivor of a civilization destroyed by a relentless, merciless enemy, the Valkyrie. And now, that enemy was coming for her. Elliot couldn't shake the thought of what she had said. They will find me, and when they do, they will destroy this world too. The words gnawed at him, digging deep into his conscience, refusing to let go. He had lived a quiet, uneventful life, one that had been peaceful to the point of monotony. But now, standing beside Lyra in his small cabin, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Lyra, too, had changed. In the days since she had arrived, her health had improved dramatically. The strange alien technology embedded in her clothing seemed to be part of the reason. It wasn't just a suit, it was a living, breathing thing, capable of healing her body at an alarming rate. Each time Elliot looked at her, he saw less of the fragile woman who had crashed in the forest and more of a being whose presence was powerful, almost overwhelming. Her eyes, once filled with confusion and fear, had shifted into something else: determination, raw and unwavering. She had begun teaching him things he had never imagined were possible. His once simplistic knowledge of engineering and mechanics was now expanding into the realm of interstellar travel, advanced combat strategies, and technology that seemed to defy all logic. She showed him how to use the small devices embedded in her clothing, which were not just for protection, but also for communication, navigation, and even combat. Elliot was no fighter, but he found himself learning faster than he thought possible, driven by the need to protect the life he had left, his quiet, peaceful life that was now in jeopardy. One evening, after a long day of lessons, Elliot sat in front of the fire, staring at the flicking flames as Lyra stood by the window, her gaze lost in the distance. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling through the trees as if nature itself was aware of the storm brewing in the skies above. Elliot could feel it, the tension in the air, the unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. He could no longer pretend that this was just some passing moment. The Varkari were coming, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what that meant. Lyra turned from the window, her eyes catching his. There was a deep sadness in her expression, one that tugged at Elliot's heart. "Elliot, you must understand something." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of emotion beneath the calm. "The Varkari will not stop until they have destroyed everything. They are relentless. They will burn this world to the ground if they have to, just to ensure I don't escape again. I've seen it happen before, entire planets, reduced to ash." Elliot swallowed hard. "I can't just let that happen. But how do we stop them? We can't do this alone." Lyra took a slow step forward, her eyes filled with an intensity that sent a chill down Elliot's spine. "No, we can't. But you don't have to do this alone. I can teach you how to fight them, how to use their own technology against them." "Teach me?" Elliot asked, incredulous. "I'm not some soldier, Lyra. I'm just an old man." Lyra's lips tightened. "You don't have to be a soldier. You just need to understand how the enemy thinks, how they move, and what they fear." It was then that Elliot realized just how far he had come from the quiet man he once was, the one who had resigned himself to the idea that his life was nearing its end. Now, he was preparing for a war he had never expected to fight. The weight of responsibility settled on him like a heavy cloak. "Okay," Elliot said, standing up, his voice firm. "I'll learn. Whatever it takes." The next few days were a blur of activity, a whirlwind of strategy and preparation. The Varkari weren't like anything Elliot had imagined. They weren't just an enemy, they were a force of nature, a scourge that devoured everything in its path. Lyra's teachings were as much about survival as they were about understanding the psychology of their enemies. They were merciless, efficient, and they didn't care about collateral damage. Their sole goal was to eradicate any trace of resistance, to wipe out anything that stood in their way. As Elliot learned, he became more than just a man. He became a tool of resistance, a symbol of something that the Varkari would never understand: human ingenuity, the stubborn will to survive, and the ability to adapt when faced with the impossible. But even as Elliot grew more adept at handling the alien technology and weapons that Lyra provided, a sense of dread settled over him. It wasn't just the Varkari that he had to worry about. It was also the price of sanctuary that Lyra had spoken of. She was hiding here, on Earth, in the quietest corner of the world. And if the Varkari came, they would bring destruction in their wake, not just for Lyra, but for everyone on this planet. Elliot couldn't bear the thought of bringing that kind of danger to his home, to the life he had known. But as Lyra had said, the price of sanctuary was steep. One evening, as they sat together at the table, Lyra finally shared something that weighed heavily on her heart. "Elliot, there's something I haven't told you," she said, her voice heavy with unspoken fear. "The Varkari, they don't just hunt us. They hunt all life. They conquer worlds, wipe out species, and harvest them for resources. It's not just my people they're after, it's all of us. If they find me, they will destroy everything. Earth will be their next target." Elliot's blood ran cold. He had known the stakes were high, but this revelation hit harder than anything he had heard before. The Varkari were not just an invading force, they were a force of extinction. There was no turning back now. They would have to fight, or they would lose everything. The days were growing shorter, the nights longer, and Elliot could feel the weight of impending danger closing in. There was no denying it now, the Varkari were coming. Every moment spent in the quiet safety of his cottage, every lesson learned from Lyra, seemed to stretch out longer, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. It had been weeks since the crash, and the countdown to disaster had already begun. The silence that had once been so comforting now felt oppressive, like a storm cloud hanging just over the horizon, waiting to burst. Lyra, always calm, always composed, had become a mirror to Elliot's own growing unease. She had been relentless in her training of him, showing him how to use weapons that, only days ago, had been beyond his understanding. He wasn't just learning how to fight. He was learning how to survive in a world that was no longer safe. Her alien technology, now hidden in the corner of his cottage, had become a part of him, like an extension of his own hands. His mind had expanded to concepts beyond anything he'd ever imagined: alien languages, the deep mechanics of spacecraft, and the intricate systems of defense that Lyra had once used to survive the Varkari's attacks. It wasn't just physical training, though. Lyra's knowledge of strategy and tactics was unparalleled, and she had taught Elliot how to think like an invader, how to anticipate the movements of an enemy that was more powerful than anything Earth had ever faced. But no matter how much he learned, Elliot couldn't shake the gnawing fear that nothing would be enough to stop the Varkari. One night, as the storm outside raged and howled, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Elliot jolted upright in his chair, his heart pounding. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. A deep, rumbling vibration that came from far below the Earth's surface. Lyra, who had been standing by the window, her eyes scanning the horizon, turned sharply toward him. "They're here," she whispered, her voice filled with an eerie certainty. "The Varkari. They've found us." Elliot's pulse quickened, his mind racing. "How do you know?" Lyra's eyes glowed with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I've been feeling it. The vibration. It's them. They have a way of cloaking themselves, but they can't hide their presence completely. They're here to finish what they started. And this time, they won't stop until they have what they came for." Without another word, she moved toward the small metallic device embedded in her suit. With a quick motion, she activated it, and the walls of the cottage shimmered with an iridescent glow, creating a protective barrier around them. Elliot had seen this process before, but never quite like this. The air inside the cottage grew heavy with energy, and the soft hum of the device filled the room like a low-frequency heartbeat. Lyra's face tightened with concentration as she worked. "We have no more time," she said. "They've pinpointed our location. We need to leave." Now, Elliot stood, still trying to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. "Where can we go? The Varkari are everywhere. How do we escape?" Lyra paused, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "We don't run. We fight." The words hit Elliot like a slap to the face. Fight? How was he supposed to fight a race that had already destroyed entire civilizations? A race that moved through space like a swarm of locusts, wiping out everything in their path. "Are you sure?" Elliot asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't even know where they are." "How can we possibly know enough?" Lyra interrupted, her voice steely and unwavering. "You've learned what you need to. You have the power to stop them. You just have to believe that you can. This world, this home of yours, is worth fighting for." and I'll help you. But only if you're ready. Elliot's thoughts spiraled. Could he really do this? Could he, a man who had spent his life avoiding conflict, become someone capable of standing against an entire invading force? His mind flashed back to the years of quiet days spent tending to his garden, reading books, and dreaming of a life that had long since passed. He was no warrior. He was no hero. But as he looked at Lyra, at the fierce determination in her eyes, something inside him shifted. He had nothing left to lose. And neither did she. Lyra stepped forward, her hands resting on his shoulders, grounding him in that moment. "You can do this," she said, her voice calm but forceful. "You've been training for this. You've learned more than you think. We're not alone. We have each other." Elliot's heart thudded in his chest, his pulse roaring in his ears. He looked around the cottage, at the life he had built in this small corner of the world. A simple life. A peaceful life. Was he really willing to risk it all to fight for something bigger than himself? The answer came in a rush. He couldn't live with himself if he did nothing. If he let the Varkari destroy everything he loved. The storm outside wasn't just the wind, it was the storm of war, and it was coming for them all. He had to face it. He had no choice. "All right," Elliot said, his voice steady now, the fear no longer overwhelming him. "Let's do this. Together." Lyra smiled, a flash of pride crossing her face. "Good. We move in 20 minutes. Get ready." The night outside had turned darker, the wind howling like a creature hungry for blood. But inside the cottage, Elliot felt something else, stirring something ancient, something primal. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was resolve. The Varkari would learn that this world was not theirs to take. They would learn that Earth, with its people, its heart, and its stubborn will to survive, was not going down without a fight. And Elliot Morrow, the old man who thought his life was over, would be the one to show them. The night had fully descended, and the air was thick with tension. Outside, the wind howled like an animal caught in a storm, yet inside the cottage, there was a strange calm. Elliot stood at the window, staring into the darkness. The world had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined even a month ago. He was no longer the quiet, lonely man who had tended his garden and lived in the shadows of his own life. No, now he was something more, something far bigger than the life he had once known. Lyra had prepared everything, each movement efficient and precise. They had packed what they could: alien weapons, small devices, and a map of the local area that Lyra had marked with strategic locations. Elliot's mind buzzed with all the knowledge she had shared with him in such a short time. His body, though older, had learned to move in ways he never thought possible. The quiet, peaceful existence he had grown accustomed to seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by a sense of urgency and purpose. As the minutes ticked by, Lyra's voice broke through the stillness. "It's time." Elliot turned, nodding. He could feel his heart racing, but there was no time for fear. There was only one goal now: to stop the Varkari. The fate of this world, his world, rested on their shoulders. The strange energy within him surged again, and he gripped the alien rifle that Lyra had handed him. His hands were steady, his eyes clear. He had trained for this moment. Lyra stepped forward, her alien technology flashing briefly in the low light as she donned her protective gear. Her eyes, glowing faintly, were fixed on the door. "Follow me," she said simply, and with that, the two of them made their way outside. The forest surrounding the cottage had never seemed so alive, the trees swaying unnaturally, as if aware of the coming storm. Elliot's eyes scanned the darkened woods, his ears straining for any sound. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something watching them. The Varkari were closing in. Elliot's breath caught when he saw it. The sky had shifted from black to an unnatural greenish hue. Far off in the distance, a massive craft hovered in the sky, its lights like distant stars. The Varkari had arrived. "They're here," Lyra whispered. "They won't stop until they have me. But we have one chance to stop them." Elliot nodded grimly, adjusting the alien rifle in his hands. He had no illusions about their chances. The Varkari were not just invaders, they were hunters, and they had the power to erase everything in their path. But they had underestimated Earth, and they had underestimated him. The Varkari might be more powerful, but they didn't have the one thing that humans had, the drive to fight for survival. They moved quickly, through the trees and underbrush, following the path Lyra had mapped out. Every rustling sound in the woods made Elliot's skin crawl, but he pressed on. He couldn't afford to let fear take over. They were getting closer to the clearing, where Lyra had set up a makeshift trap, a defense system she had created using the technology she had brought with her. They reached the clearing in silence. The large metallic Varkari craft loomed above them, casting an eerie shadow over the land. Elliot's breath quickened as he spotted a group of Varkari soldiers unloading from the ship. They were tall, their bodies encased in armor that gleamed in the dim light. Their eyes, black as the void, scanned the area methodically, searching for any sign of their prey. Lyra motioned for Elliot to stay low. "This is it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We hit them hard, fast, and take out their communications first. If we disable their ship, we stop them from calling reinforcements." Elliot nodded, his heart pounding. They had one shot. If they failed, the Varkari would call in their full force, and it would be over for Earth. They would need to be smart, precise, and quick. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and she activated her cloaking device. Within seconds, she vanished from sight, blending into the environment like a ghost. Elliot's own heart raced. This was it. There would be no turning back now. He crouched low, moving through the underbrush, as quiet as possible. His footsteps seemed to make no sound, even on the wet ground. The Varkari soldiers were still focused on scanning the area, their backs to him. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. Then, in one swift motion, he stood and raised his rifle. The first shot rang out, the sound sharp and echoing through the night. A Varkari soldier fell, collapsing with a thud that sent ripples of panic through the group. The remaining soldiers reacted quickly, drawing their weapons and scanning the area, but by then, it was too late. Lyra's voice crackled through his comm device. "Elliot, take out the leader. He's the key to their command structure." Elliot didn't hesitate. His instincts kicked in, and he took aim. The Varkari leader stood tall, his face hidden behind a helmet. He wasn't looking in Elliot's direction, and Elliot knew this was their chance. With a precise shot, the leader collapsed to the ground, his body jerking violently before going still. Chaos erupted. The remaining soldiers fired wildly, their weapons emitting high-pitched energy blasts, but Lyra was already in motion, darting through the trees, taking down one soldier after another with swift, calculated moves. Elliot kept his focus on the ship. They had to disable it. He moved quickly toward the craft, using the cover of the forest to his advantage. Lyra's cloaking device allowed her to move like a shadow, taking down enemy after enemy. Elliot's pulse pounded in his ears as he approached the ship's exposed control panel. There was no time to waste. He aimed his weapon at the exposed wiring and fired. Sparks flew, and a massive explosion shook the ground. The Varkari ship sputtered, its engines failing as the energy system short-circuited. The Varkari forces began to retreat, their communications disrupted, their command structure in disarray. Lyra and Elliot had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. As the last of the invaders fled, Lyra's eyes met Elliot's, her face filled with a rare, soft smile. "We did it," she said, her voice quiet but filled with pride. "But this is only the beginning." Elliot nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had come into this fight with nothing, but he was leaving with something greater, hope. Hope for his world. Hope for the future. The storm had passed, but a new one was on the horizon, and together they would face it whatever it brought.